delay.
Okay,
Okay, so we are live now.
great. Good afternoon. My name is Sarah Episcopo. Are we live? We're good?
Okay, so we are live now.
Great. Let me mute. Good afternoon. My name is Sarah Episcopo, and I'm here today to present on application writing for graduate application essays. A little bit about myself. I'm an ESL instructor for the University of Texas at Austin, so I'm also here to represent and present my school. And also within UT Austin, we do a program for ESL services, specifically for graduate students applying to the university. So my job is that I teach international students who are coming to the US to go to grad school, and they are trying to get into graduate programs, and they're writing this essay. And I've taught for about 10 years, and I've seen a lot of essays, a lot of these statement of purpose essays. So I'll often call it a statement of purpose or an SOP. And when I'm referring to it quickly, I'll frequently refer to it with that name. Let's get going. So again, like I said, I've seen a lot of essays, and I've got some tips for today. Please be sure that you have your handout. Our advisor posted the link for the handout, and I will be using that as we go along for our workshop today. So most of you, I'm assuming, are applying to graduate programs in the US, and you're writing this essay. And I'd like to talk about a few misconceptions first. Then I'll talk about my tips for everyone. And then I've got 14 bits of advice from all the essays that I've seen. We'll look at a couple of examples, and I'll kind of explain on the handout some of the brainstorming that you can do to help yourself. And then the packet, the handout that she has the link to, has other resources, and I'll kind of give some advice and go through those. One thing that I find is that if we think about the 5 parts of the application for grad school, you've got your essay, which we'll talk about today. You've got your CV, your resume, your test scores, your TOEFL, your IELTS, etc., your GRE. You've got your letters of recommendation, and then you also have the application. And I find that students applying, when we apply to grad school, we typically focus on our scores for our tests, because we think that that's the determining factor that's going to get us in. And in fact, those scores, in my personal opinion, are not the most important part of our application. That essay, along with recommendation letters that supplement the essay, is the most important part of your application, part of that package, right? And so we want to spend a lot of time on it. Let's get into the handout. If you'll go ahead and open up the handout that you see in front of you for the link, and we'll look together. And I also just want to add, as I'm transitioning, welcome everyone from Mexico. It's exciting to get to chat with you today. So let's go ahead and open up the handout. I'm going to open it up on the screen, full screen, so you can follow it along with me. And we'll go through what the contents of today's discussion is going to be. Give me just a second to open up the application. Okay. Great. So in front of you, you'll see the worksheet, and it'll kind of go through what we're going to cover today. And on the first page, it's how I get students started with their brainstorming. And you'll notice it's questions that are quite deep, quite philosophical, and things that we don't really think of before we're making this application and designing our essay. But in fact, they're the most important. And they come down to, why are you doing this? Why are you going to graduate school? Why are you about to spend a lot of money and a lot of time devoted to this project? And what they're looking for in your application is that you're able to articulate those things. Yeah. In that essay, they want you to know what you want. So let's look at some of these questions. Brainstorming. What are your goals? And I've got kind of the blanks here, and you can follow along your own brainstorm, but I'm going to talk out loud to fill in these boxes. So I'm going to imagine I'm a teacher, but I have gone to graduate school, and I'm going to imagine if I were to apply to a graduate program now, what would I fill in these blanks with? So I teach graduate applicants, and I would say something like, in 3 years, I really want to know how to inform my students of the different rhetorical structures that exist in English, for example. In 5 years, I want to be a good teacher or have the tools to teach effective writing and academic writing. Notice we go to number 3, in graduate school. This isn't, I want to study. What do you want to learn, or what do you want to know? I want to learn or discover X. I want to answer questions about Y, right? What is it that you want to learn in graduate school? Number 4, why are you going to graduate school? If you don't know why, then it takes some brainstorming and some processing to think about it. Why are you doing this thing? Be able to articulate it. Number 5 seems like a funny question, but it's actually not. So academic thinking and writing and all the things we do in academia, our goal is to solve problems, right? There's some scientific question that we're trying to solve. And this doesn't just apply to the sciences, the hard sciences. This applies to liberal arts also. So you're trying to answer questions in academia. And by answering those questions, you're hoping to expand human knowledge somehow, right? Or have some kind of skill or tool that's going to help you help others. This is what I mean by how you want to save the world. What problem do you want to solve? Number 6 is a similar question. Research solutions to this problem. What is the problem that you're trying to solve? Number 7, and you'll notice that many of these questions are just rephrasings of the same question. Essentially, why are you doing this and what do you want? A major field or world problem that I want to solve is fill in the blank. If you can brainstorm for many minutes or days on some of these questions and really come up with some detailed answers for being able to articulate what you would say in response to these, this is the beginning step to developing a pretty strong essay. So let's move on to the next page, page 2. I've got some quick facts and some pre-writing tips, and let's go through them together. Number 1, the average graduate application essay goes through about 30 drafts. I'm not kidding, 30 drafts. That means a lot of time and a lot of energy. And that means that whatever you produce between draft 1 and draft 15 is probably going to be pretty bad. But we've got to write about draft 1 through draft 15 to get to draft 16, right? You've got to go through this process. Many of us believe that in the first 2-3 drafts, we have something that is worth our time and energy and is worth submitting. But I've seen essays written at draft 3, and I have to look at the writer and say, I'm so sorry, you got some work to do. Let's sit down and let's keep going. So my point here is embrace the process. It is a process, and the second you can realize that it's going to take you some time to go through that process of thinking and processing your ideas, the easier it's going to be over time. Number 2, like I said, you will most likely delete most of what you write in draft 1 through 10. That might make you cry. It feels a little sad. But again, this is the physical process of thinking through paper. That's what writing is. And I'll read this out loud. Writing is the physical process of thinking. So a very important tip I give to my my writers of other languages who are writing in English, focus on your ideas first, meaning write it in your language. Brainstorm. Don't worry about English grammar until the very last draft, because what if you spend hours and days composing paragraphs and working on perfect grammar for those paragraphs to ultimately realize that you need to delete those paragraphs? It really ends up being kind of a waste of time. Let's move on to number 3. Just as a rough estimate, I'd say that roughly to get those 30 drafts out, as a rough estimate, no less than 2 months of working on it, at least 3 times a week. Again, that depends on you. You might work on it once a week for 4 months. You might work on it in a more compact period of time, but whichever you choose, and think about how much time it's going to take you to spend on this thing and budget that time. Yeah. Number 4, check your word count. Universities may or may not restrict your word count. And be sure you know beforehand for each university. If you have a 500 word count, it can be a little harder to say what you want to say in 500 words than 2,000 words, but also 2,000 words might say a lot of stuff that isn't necessary. Anyway, check that word count. And number 5, through the process that we see on number 1, if we embrace this process of 30 drafts, we have to accept that over time our ideas are going to expand and your essay is going to be at 2,000 words, and then it's going to contract. You're going to go in and you're going to revise and you're going to take out ideas that are not completely essential, and it's going to contract to 500 words. And then the next week you come up with some big exciting idea, a new discovery about what you want, and it's going to grow again to 2,000 words. And that's great. And know that you're going to contract that over time. Again, embrace the process. Allow your ideas to grow and then trim them down. Let them grow again, trim them down. Again, 30 drafts, folks. It's a lot. I'd like to move into my pre-writing tips. These are very important. And again, this is based on my experience from working with a lot of students writing this essay. Number 1, there are 2 documents that we're submitting to our graduate programs. One of them is your resume or your CV. The other one is your statement of purpose essay. They're different for a reason. So your CV and resume is where you list all the stuff that you did. Your statement of purpose essay is not a place for that. It's where you write about yourself and what you want. So I repeat, an SOP is a statement of purpose is not a resume. Don't simply list your experiences. Take those experiences and put them in your CV. That's what it's for. So number 2, a statement of purpose is, and I'm going to say this really loud and clear, it is a statement of purpose. It is a summary explanation of your known life goals and ambitions and how you came to realize those goals, your purpose. What do you want? To find your goals, answer the questions. What do you want in life, in graduate school, in your career, and how will a degree in X help you reach that goal, right? Number 3. Number 1, 2, and 3 are kind of the similar topics, but said in different ways. Statement of purposes should state and focus on the things that you want from a graduate program. It's okay to describe an experience that you did, but if you do, keep that description short and simple, maybe even just 1 sentence. And what they want in that essay is they want you to explain how that one experience made you realize what you wanted. Yeah. We'll look at some brainstorming for this in just a bit. Number 4, we want to see your goals in that essay at the beginning of your essay. Not the first sentence of your essay, but definitely by the end of the first introductory paragraph. It says clearly state your goals, short and long term. This means in a graduate program, I want to fill in the blank. And in my life, I want to fill in the blank. We need to know that at the beginning of your essay. This is very important because I find that writers from other languages will wait until the end of their essay to state their point or their goals. And we want to reverse that order. We want to state it at the very beginning in an English essay. Number 5, then once you state that goal at the beginning, relate every paragraph back to your goal. Repeat that goal throughout each paragraph. This is a strategy we have for academic English writing, and it's something that takes a while to get used to as we're learning English, but it's a different way, a different rhetorical structure. We want to list some sections, experiences, your research interests, why you became interested in this area, your goals, and then also that last one, why do you want this particular university or professor? I'll get into more details on that in a minute. Number 7, focus on what makes you unique. And this is very important because I find that this process of writing the application essay is so kind of scary and daunting to people that we like to go online, we look for templates, we watch webinars, we see what other people are doing, and we do a lot of copy pasting, not of content, but of like the templates and the structures for the essay. And what ends up happening is that it feels a little empty. It says on number 7, delete any sentence that anyone else could say. If someone else could make a claim, a sentence, could write a sentence that is in your essay, delete that essay. Focus on what makes you unique. Let's move to number 8 through 12. I'll scroll down. Number 8. I have many students tell me, Sarah, I'm going to a master's program in education. I don't know my research interests. I don't know what specific things I want to research. That's totally fine, especially for a master's program, unlike a PhD. In a master's program, we accept that you are coming to the university to learn, right? You're still a consumer of knowledge and not a producer of knowledge. And so if you don't know your specific research interests, it's okay to ask questions. Yeah. For example, in a graduate program, I want to know why, fill in the blank with your question. So why students learn in this way. These are my research questions. I want to research how. These things don't suggest that you need to know this already, but ask questions in your essay. Yeah, state those explicitly in your essay. Number 9. Many students come to me and say, I think I want to study X now, but what if that changes when I enter my graduate program and I get excited about something else? And it's totally fine. So statement of purpose essay is not a contract. You can say what you want to do and what you plan on doing. If you have a goal now and you're excited about it, say it. When you get into the program, you might change your mind, and that's okay. But that essay is giving the audience the idea and understanding that you at least know what you want now, and you know why you're going to school. Number 10, 11, and 12 have something in common. Number 10, I invite students to think of, or applicants to think of, the role of applying to a university program. Our perception is typically that we need to prove that we are worthy of acceptance. And number 10 is an interesting point, I believe, because we have to remind ourselves that the university is selling you a product. You're the one paying them money to provide you with a service. Does that university have what it takes to meet your goals? Do your research to find out. In your statement of purpose, describe all the ways that that specific university meets your expectations for a graduate program. If they don't meet your expectations, if they don't meet your goals, don't apply there. Apply to another university that meets the things that you want. And so I keep repeating this word want. This means you have to figure out what you want and articulate it in the essay. Number 11, talk to faculty that you're interested in working with. This means emailing them, asking to visit them, spending time and energy looking for people who match your goals. Again, if they don't have what you want, don't apply there. Number 12 is my final note as a teacher. I get a lot of students that just, they want to be humble, and they want to be kind of, again, like asking the university for permission to accept them. No, be brave. Talking about yourself for anyone, whether it's in your language or another language, talking about the things you want in life, and your dreams. This is not easy stuff, but this essay is your one chance to sell yourself. You do not need to be humble. Be brave. Let's move on to the next topic. Page number 3. Page number 3 and page number 4. I have 2 example essays written by the same person. This was a student of mine who's since become a good friend of mine. And I worked with her through her application process and on her essays. And what we have here, and I'll just kind of flip through. The first one is the first draft. Remember, there's 30 drafts. The first one is the first draft. And the second page is her last draft. This is the one she actually submitted to her university program and that she got accepted for. And what I like to invite us to do before we even read, and you can read this at home on your own, but on questions under the instructions where it says number 2 and number 3, the red is where she explains what she did. Yeah, and the green is where she describes what she wants. So I'm looking at the first draft, dids versus wants. There's a lot of red here. And I'll just skim through some of the lines. So I visited my journalist friend, the situation, this story happened, this is happening in my country, I did this, I did this, I did this, great, I did this. It's more explanation of the stuff she did. So if you'll remember from one of my earlier tips that anything that is what you did should go where? In your CV or resume. Yeah? The essay is for what we want. And as I skim through the document and we look at the colors, notice how much is in green, and green is indicating what she wants. There's not much. Let's look at the sentences where she says what she wants. I decided to delve into journalism to update and create new mechanisms and methods to communicate efficiently. Okay, this is what she wants. We've got another one here. The master's program in journalism will help me to reach this goal. Okay, it's unclear quite what her goal is at the beginning, but we can keep reading here. And then green at the bottom. And notice where those greens are. Remember I had said earlier that the greens, the wants, the goals, should be stated by what point in the essay? By the end of the first paragraph. It should be here. It should be at the end of the first paragraph. But we don't really know what her goals are until the end of the second paragraph. And in fact, most of her goals are stated at the end of the essay. Again, I find this common in writing from folks from other languages as a rhetorical structure, where we state our point at the end of our writing. But this isn't the structure we want in English. We want more statement of our goals at the beginning, and we want those goals repeated at the end. What you'll notice here is that in yellow, again, so red is all the stuff that she did. There's a lot of red. Green is all the stuff that she wants. The yellow is sort of how the things she did made her realize what she wants. We're going to talk about that in a second. And let's move to the next one. And I invite you on your own to use these 2 drafts to actually read in depth and kind of look at kind of the process that this writer went through from her first draft to her last draft. You can do that at home. Let's look at the next draft so we can compare, just simply comparing the colors. Last draft, again, draft 30. Same thing. The things that she did is in red. The things that she wants are in green. Notice the difference. And I'm just going to read the first paragraph aloud because I think it's worth looking at how she transformed that first essay to the second essay. As a journalist, I developed my years of a career in a difficult political process in which the current government deliberately violates human rights and severely limits freedom of expression. So one sentence on what she did. Yellow. how that experience made her realize what she wants. As a result, my people are fleeing my country, enduring worldwide diaspora. This is especially vulnerable for migrants on Venezuelan borders. For this reason, though I have years of experience, in journalism, I now seek to better understand the role of journalism in establishing foundations for human rights, specifically by documenting refugee human rights violations in Latin American borders. Because of UT Austin's deep, notice she's bringing in the university, because of UT Austin's deep connection to Latin American studies, I hope to is a synonym for want, pursue a graduate degree in UT journalism in order to reach these goals. Notice how specific that goal statement is, and we know what she wants by the end of the first paragraph. The rest of the essay is more want. Green, 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 green. And I'll invite you to read this on your own, but I do want to point out the bold words is every time she says want. I want this, I want that, I hope to, I aim to. These are the things that she wants to do through her graduate program, and it is a majority of the essay. Now, just as a reminder, this is draft 30. To get to this point, I want you to look at the previous draft, and we have to accept she cut a lot of paragraphs to go from draft 1 to draft 30. You'll also notice that the grammar in draft 1 is not perfect. And that's because I invited her, I encouraged her to not focus on the grammar, because I knew, as you will know, as you should know, that she would eventually delete most of that information from her draft 1 and replace it with what we see in draft 2. At the end is when we can go through, invite an English-speaking friend to help us with our grammar, only after we feel really good about what we've written and what we're saying our goals are. I'd like to move on to the next topic, and I do see some questions popping up on the side. If you'll hold the questions at the end, I am going to have a short Q&A. So hold those questions. I'll come back and review them in just a second as we get towards the end. Let's continue to page 6. And if you printed the handout, or if you're able to just type on the PDF, or if you have a piece of paper in front of you, this is where we start brainstorming. And I'm just going to talk you through what that brainstorm looks like so that you can do it on your own at home. So I've developed a concept that I call the 30-70 principle. What I mean by that is that 70% of your essay, and I'm going to scroll up to that 30th draft or final draft, 70% of your essay needs to state what you want. Notice 70% or more of this second essay is in green. And 30% of or less is what she did. We're going to divide this into a template we see on page 5. And I'm going to skim down to where it says part 2. You'll see part 1 says goals. Again, can we articulate the answers to these questions? What do you want? What do you want? What do you want? What do you want? And being specific. But let's look at a way to make it a little more specific. I'm going to go to part 2. And here's how this would work. We look at the things we did, the experiences that we had, a work experience, a research experience. But we only pick those experiences, the dids, so that we can transform them and explain to our reader, this thing I did made me realize what I want. And I invite you to be thinking of experiences you had. So I'll give an example. I'm a teacher and I teach international graduate students. And throughout my career, I've struggled with, the experience that I had is that I have students coming to me and they don't know the timeline for how to apply to graduate programs. They don't know how much energy and research and work it takes. So this thing I did, this experience that I have, this made me realize that this is causing students to waste a lot of time. They come to the United States, they think they're ready, and they think they have all the things they're supposed to have for graduate programs, and they don't. And this is a problem because a lot of people end up having to go home. I want, my 40% here, I want to develop some kind of instructional assistance program or some kind of methodology to get the word out to my students through either a systematic research program, through publicity, through webinars. I want to research and understand how I can explain to the people coming to the US to study graduate programs how they can do it effectively, efficiently, so that they can meet their goals. Yeah. And I would spend more of my time talking about what I want than the thing that I did. Here's a tricky thing. Sometimes we start with our experience, the thing I did, and we move to what it made us realize what we wanted. But I invite us to work backwards. What if we started with what I want? I want X in a graduate program. I want Y in a graduate program in the future. And that's these questions we see in the part 1, right? I want to save the world by fill in the blank. We start with what we want and we really brainstorm out and make sure we're very clear on what we want. Then we ask ourselves, why do we want those things? I'll tell you, I'm passionate about helping international students. I'm also passionate about linguistics. Notice this is me brainstorming my wants. I'm passionate about language. I'm passionate about language education. I want to continue helping students meet their goals, learn English, and improve their writing. And I could talk for hours about that. But what made me realize that? Well, I'm a study abroad student. When I was young, I went abroad. I studied in France. I studied in Mexico. And when I studied abroad, so notice I talked about what I wanted. I've gone back and realized what it was that I did, what experience I had that made me realize what I want. When I studied abroad, I realized the value of a study abroad experience for myself. And I realized that how that can break down walls and barriers between countries, between cultures, between stereotypes. And so that experience I did made me realize that now I want to devote my life to helping international students do a similar thing. Notice how I worked backwards. I started with what I want and what I'm passionate about, and I then go back to the first column and talk about the thing I did that made me realize what I want. Folks, I hope you notice that this is not just academic writing. This is kind of therapy, right? We're really working through a lot of our own emotional realizations about why we do what we do. And that may seem extreme for an application essay, but if you can articulate the answers to these questions, you're a better candidate because they're going to look at you compared to people that don't know what they want. And they're going to say, this person, this applicant knows why they're coming here and has a vision for themselves. Yeah. I invite you to work in both directions of this part 2. So we can start from the thing we did, going to what you want, but also start with what you want and work backwards. Why do you want that thing? What did you experience that made you realize it? Let's move on to the next section. And I'm going to kind of wrap up the discussion on the content and look at the template on organization. What you see on page 5 is what we consider, you'll probably recognize it from, for example, a TOEFL or a GRE template essay for a 5-paragraph essay. And it is the standard for what the English reader is expecting. Each box indicates a paragraph. And if we had a 5-paragraph essay, you've got your introduction at the beginning. And notice thesis statement at the end of the introduction paragraph. Thesis statement means your goal. What do you want and why? What are your short-term and long-term goals? But notice how for our body paragraphs, I've taken the template that you see above, did, realize, want. What I did made me realize what I want, and I've transformed it into each paragraph. So I might spend 30% explaining my experience, 30% explaining why I realized what I wanted from that experience, and then most of that paragraph talking about what I want because of that experience. Then I do it again. Then I do it again. And each of these paragraphs, what I want should relate to that overall short and long-term goal of why you're applying to a graduate program. At the end, we have the conclusion. We're repeating that thesis and goal. And it makes a nice little hamburger, right? You got your meat in the middle of your paragraphs and your introduction, conclusion at the end, kind of packaging it on both sides. I invite students to use this template to create an outline and to kind of follow through the template to make sure they're on track with the paragraphs that we want in our essay. Now, should it have 2 paragraphs? Should it have 5 paragraphs? It really depends on you, your goals, the word count that your university wants, and then also what you have to say, right? And the organization of that really depends on you and the multiple drafts. I'm going to wrap up with page 7 and page 8. Number 8, checklist for a statement of purpose. Use this checklist for each draft of your statement of purpose. This is what I use to help my students. If I read a draft, I go through this checklist with them, and it follows along with the stuff that I just mentioned that we've already discussed earlier. Thesis statement at the end of the first paragraph, your goal. Are your goals clear? 30% or less of what you did, 70% or more of what you want. Your wants support your goals. Number 6, I do want to add, it's an interesting side note on number 6. I find that students will say something like, very simple, like, I want to go to graduate school. And I say, okay, that does not pass my why test. Call this Sarah's why test. Why do you want to go to graduate school? Because, and this is Sarah's example, because I want to help international graduate students. Okay, great. Why? Well, because this population has the most ambition with academia, but struggles with communicating their goals, especially in writing. Look at how specific that is. And if your audience that's listening to you explain this can at the end say, oh, okay, yeah, you've passed the why test. Now, this is hard to do on our own. It's good to have an audience for this, but it's good to have a friend with you where you're explaining what you want, and they can just simply be there to say, why, why, why? And you fill in the blank. This helps you get a little bit more specific. Number 8, I'm going to skip down to, do you explain why you want to go to this university or department program? This is important, and I think that some programs or some application helpers will say this isn't so important. I think it is, because again, if you know what you want, does that university have what you want? Do your research to find out. If they don't apply to that program. I'm going to skip down to the last part of the handout, and this is kind of one of the parts that students love the most. You want the sentence formulas, the sentence skeletons, and I've categorized it into each of the sections that we've been discussing. Your goal statement, so fill in the blanks. I want a linguistics degree at the University of Texas at Austin so that I can research how to understand second language acquisition for Spanish speakers. Right? I filled in the blank for my own goals. Copy paste these. This is for you to use as sentence skeletons in your own writing, and fill it in with your content. Experiences, realizations, wants. Why this university? And finally, your conclusion. Have fun with these. I think it's helpful for students to see how these things are phrased. So I'm going to pause there and kind of turn back to the video. And as I do, I'll talk a little bit about, and let me just make sure you can see me. Hello again. everybody. I'm going to kind of go through a few of the questions and that I see in the chat. And then I'm also going to, at the end, talk a little bit about my university and what it does. So let me go through a few of the questions. Mario Ortega, question. Is it okay to be specific in my research interest? It's really okay to be specific in your research interest. The more specific you can be, the more you're articulating what you want, right? Now, I do want to distinguish between the master's applications and the PhD applications. A PhD especially needs to know what their specific research interests are. In a master's program, we're not assuming that you know exactly what you want, but we assume that you know why you want to study that field. So I think that's a great question. Yes. Question number 2, who's reading this essay? Advisors or admissions staff, or both? Both. It depends on your department. I don't want to speak for each university. It depends on the department. I invite you to call your university advisor and ask them who is on the committee that's going to be reading the essay. They won't give you names, but they'll tell you roughly, how many people are on the committee. If it's the advisors, if it's the professors, it depends, completely depends. I believe there's a question before Mario's. Is the statement of purpose the same thing as the study objectives? Interesting question. So the statement of purpose, what I'm calling statement of purpose, has a lot of different names. I haven't heard the term study objectives before. I'm assuming it is what the objectives are that you want to study. Like, why are you going to graduate school? What are your research interests? I'm assuming it's the same, but again, the statement of purpose has a lot of different names. I also want to kind of make sure it's clear that the statement of purpose, I kind of forgot what I was going to say. Hold on, let me come back to the questions. Statement of purpose, same thing as study objectives. I know what I was going to say. That it's not just useful for applying to graduate programs. Once you're in a graduate program, you're probably going to be asked to apply to scholarships, for research grants, and overall having to promote yourself and what you want, why you're there. Yeah. So the things that we just brainstormed, the answers to these questions are not going to just help you with the statement of purpose, or what's called a statement of purpose. It's going to help you with your study objectives, whatever that ends up being. Check your department website, and all the other names for anything you have to use to apply to anything, a job, a scholarship, and the different names we have for application essays. I'm going to move down to another question. Mario Ortega, Rainier, how determining is the identification of research interest for doctoral studies? I'd say it's pretty strong. And I do have to admit, I mostly see master's applications. That's mostly what I read. But I do have PhD students, candidates applying to programs. And ask yourself this. You've got 2 essays. One of them very explicitly talks about their specific research interests. And one of them just kind of talks about their general goals and what they want in an academic program. Which one are you going to choose? Probably the one that knows what they want and why. Yeah. And so I think the more specific you can be, the better. Another question. Let's see. Itza Garcia, how specialized is the staff that regularly reads PhD statements of purpose? They're not staff. They are they're your professors. The committee of people that typically read those application essays are the professors that are teaching and working for that university. And so they're the ones that are on that committee. They are very specialized in their particular field of study. Yeah. Jacqueline Aguilar, what about if the essays look ambitious? Do it. If your essay is ambitious, great. I said that earlier about not being humble, and about being brave about the things you want and why you want them. Again, write as you would as a reader. you've got two essays, one person is very ambitious, the other person is not, who are you going to choose, right? We want to know what you want and why. The why test, Celia, she asks the why test, do I need to write all details in my essay? This goes back to, I think it's a great question. This goes back to the process and those 30 drafts. For the first 5 drafts, yes, put everything you can think of, as many details as possible. Make that essay 3,000 words long. Right? And what then you ask yourself is, as you go through draft 5, draft 10, draft 15, draft 20, draft 25, then you ask yourself, is this detail relevant to my goal and to articulating what I want? And we begin deleting, and then it grows and then it shrinks and it grows and it shrinks. So I would say, as you're brainstorming for that why test, yes. And over time, ultimately, you're the decider. You get to decide when it feels good. I will add an important point here. I find that most students, when they come to me from draft 1 to 10, and I read it and we sit in a conference and I ask them, how do you feel about your essay? And they say, not so great. And I think, okay, yeah, because it's not so great. It's not that great of an essay. But by the time they get to draft 25, and I ask them the same question, I say, how do you feel about this essay? And they smile and they say, I feel really good, right? So how do you know when you're done? You know you're done when you feel really good about what you've written and you feel like it represents you. And until you get to that point, you're in the middle of the process. Keep working, yeah? Marielos, this another question. This document structure works for a scholarship application. Yes, we covered that. Maybe not the exact structure. You want to check that department website or the scholarship application website for what they want exactly. But the idea is absolutely, right, of being able to articulate what you want. Diego Sandoval has the next question. Can you use the same statement of purpose for different universities, but for the same department? Hold on. Use the same statement of purpose for different universities, same department. And he says, for example, you're applying to a physics program, same department, physics in one university, physics in another university. So I say for a PhD, definitely not. A PhD, you really have to customize your essay for each program you're applying to and for each university. Again, why are you going to that school? If you're not sure why, then don't apply to that program. And we want to articulate that in our essay. But for a master's program, we kind of roughly know what we want to say, and we do want to tailor it for each university. The more you can do that, the better, right? The more you're able to talk about that particular university, the more you're connecting with that university. I'll move on to a couple other questions, and then I'm going to close the questions because I'd like to get to my presentation about UT before 7. Gerardo. I'll read your question. Do you have any particular tips for MBA applications? I don't. I'm so sorry. I'm not sure exactly for the MBA in particular. Let me move on to your next question. Instead of an SOP, when they ask for questions like, what matters the most to you, should it be more personal? Yes, it should be as personal as possible. We're asking ourselves, what are you passionate about? Why are you passionate about it? This is personal stuff. And I like I said earlier, I sit in conferences with students about their essays, and we do more therapy about their dreams, their goals, and their ambitions than we do writing. And that's because this essay, whatever form it takes, it's challenging, and it is going to make you think and question and probably cry over trying to decide and determine who you are and what you want in life. And how do you put that into words, right? Diego Sandoval, 2 more questions. Is mentioning specific potential advisors or professors and why they match your research goals a good strategy for statement of purposes? So I find that students, they write their essay Then they go do their research at that university. They find someone that kind of roughly matches their research goals and they copy paste the name in. And when they do that, it's pretty obvious, right? Because they haven't really written much about that professor because they don't really know much about that professor. Instead, if we do our research, so if you're going to put a professor's name in your statement of purpose essay, you better have read at least one of their publications, maybe two, maybe three, maybe four. Again, we're assuming that you know what you want and you've been kind of working with people and ideas around that topic. So if you're wanting to reach out to a professor, before you drop their name in that essay, and you won't like this, but call them or email them or contact them. And we don't want to just say, hey, you and I have something in common. Can we chat? We want to say, I've read your research and I like your ideas about such and such. I have this idea about such and such. And I'd like to ask you questions of what you think of my ideas, for example, or I'd like to ask you more about your perspective on blah, blah, blah. Your intention for emailing them is not to get them to give you permission to put their name in your essay. It's actually to connect with fellow scholars about the thing you're interested in. And if you make that connection, then great. You probably want to work with that professor and you have very explicit reasons why. In that case, yes, give their name in there. But if you're copy pasting names over just to fill it in, no, definitely not. And one more question and then we'll stop with the question and answers about the SOP. Ale Limon says, in which part of the essay can I write about someone that inspired me? Kind of a role model. Is it okay in the yellow part of the essay? Yeah, I think that's a really cool question. So talking about role models and a person in particular that inspired you, if we go back to the 30-70 principle, be sure that as you talk about the person that inspired you, it's in the context of already knowing what you want to do. So I know what I want, and here's the reason why. So it might be one or two sentences about, in elementary school and in high school and undergraduate school, I met this person and this happened. 2 sentences maximum. That experience made me realize, fill in the blank. That's your yellow section. And then we want 70% or more, or 40% or more of that paragraph about what that person, that experience of that person made you realize what you want to do with your life and why you're passionate about it. Yeah. So I'm going to wrap up the question and answer, and I'm going to transition into a 5-minute talk about my university, about UT Austin, the University of Texas at Austin. And the point here is that if you like what you see, again, I am an ESL teacher. I teach academic English. I teach academic writing for the University of Texas at Austin. I teach a 14-week course on academic writing during the spring and fall semesters and in the summer. And throughout those courses, I cover statement of purpose writing. And let me explain a little bit about UT and what we do and where my teaching falls into our program. One moment, please. I'll get us set up. Give me just a second. There we go. So my university is the University of Texas in Austin, Texas. Big state, wonderful place to be. Austin is a very hip place, a hip university. We also have a wonderful, wonderful school. And I'm going to kind of go through a couple of PowerPoint slides to introduce some of the topics that we have at our university. UT Austin is a huge school. We have 51,000 students, large teaching faculty, different departments. We rank 10 in national rankings in the top 10. And we have one of the largest academic libraries in the world. So for especially graduate applicants and graduate PhDs and master's students, that library is very well used. It's a great resource in academia. On the list, you'll see not all, but some of our schools that we offer at UT. If you find yours on there, great. You can use that term to Google the program at UT Austin, and it'll take you straight to that department website. A couple of rankings that you'll see here. We're pretty high on a lot of national rankings and international rankings. A lot of research programs that put us in those top categories. Talk a little bit about the graduate admission program. I'm from the ESL department, the ESL program, and my folks are ESL students that are applying to UT Austin for graduate school, or they're applying to other programs in the US, and they're coming here to learn English in my program. So I can't speak to specific departments at UT. That is not my area of specialization, but the process roughly is that you do the application. There is an application fee. You have your official transcripts, your scores, and then also we talked about those different parts and elements of the essay. That CV, the resume, letters of recommendation, and anything else that the department requests. And what I want to emphasize here is that you absolutely must go to the specific university department website and read it. A lot of the information that we want our students to know about that department is on the website. So if you email the advisor of that program with lots of questions that's on the department website, they're going to just say, "Oh, thanks for emailing us. Go read the website." So there is a lot of the deadlines and different rules vary by the program, but be sure you look at that specific website for help on what to do. Now, what we've got here are some details on the average student, graduate student that applies to UT, GPA, verbal scores, test scores, etc. Just take a look at that for what their scores would be on those tests. Again, this does vary depending on the department that you're applying to, so be sure to check. Within UT Austin, under the international office, we have a very large international office, and we have an ESL services program, and that is who I teach for. So I help students who come to the US to learn English for a semester, for a year, for 2 years, and then I also help graduate students, international graduate students who are in the university going to graduate programs at UT, who are taking English courses, specifically academic writing and academic speaking. Some details about the programs we offer. We do have an academic program, and we also have a kind of a general program, the English language program versus the academic English program. If you go to the website for UT Austin International Office, you will find the resources on ESL services. The program that I teach for is the academic English program. This is for students who already have bachelor's degrees. Many of you are these students. You have a bachelor's degree. You're looking to go to a university in the US for a master's or a PhD program. And we're trying to help you prepare yourself for university at a graduate level in English, right? We cover writing, grammar, listening, speaking. You've got these different classes, and then reading and discussion. And it is an intensive program. We go 5 days a week for 18 hours a week. It is quite a lot of work, but the goal is to prepare you for your university, your graduate program, which will be actually more study per week. Yeah. A little more about the academic English program. We call it the AEP program. Preparing students for graduate school. It's not exactly like graduate school because the focus is on your language abilities, how to write, read at an academic level, how to give speeches, how to pronounce and do pronunciation, to interact with your professors and your colleagues, and overall what the graduate experience is like at an American university, and the expectations that professors would have of you as you're performing your career in English. I'm going to wrap up the webinar with our motto. We say, "What starts here changes the world." And I hope it's clear that from my passion about what I do. Let me stop with the slide. I hope it's clear from the passion about what I do that I really do believe that I think that the things we do at UT Austin, the stuff that I can do for international students that come to my university, I really do think it changes the world, because I think that all of you who are applying to the US and coming, you're changing the world, both for the US, for your country, for the world. So if you liked the content of this webinar, great. Go look up UT Austin, and check out the programs that we offer. Check out the university, the ESL AEP, the academic program. And if you go to the website, you'll find me in the faculty section also. If you have other questions in the future, send me an email. You'll find me on the faculty page of ESL. And I believe the advisor can send a link to my email. Thank you, everyone. It is 7 o'clock, and I really appreciate your time and energy. Good luck on that application process and writing that essay, and thanks again. Good night.